I spent 22 years building a life with a man who erased me in 96 hours. While I lay paralyzed in a hospital bed, my husband was signing my death warrant to collect an $85,000 payout. I watched my own daughter post my funeral photos on Instagram while I was still breathing. But to understand how I got here, I need to take you back to the basement of the Chicago History Museum. I spent 22 years building a life with a man who erased me in 96 hours. My name is Vaitkus. I am a senior archivist. I keep the records because records never lie. But my own history was being shredded while I lay silent in a hospital bed. It started on a Tuesday in late October. I was in the basement of the Chicago History Museum. The air there smells like old dust and damp parchment. It is my favorite smell in the world. I was cataloging a collection of 19th century maps. The paper felt brittle and dry beneath my fingertips. Precisely at 2014 p.m., the edges of the room began to fray. The fluorescent lights overhead started to hum like a swarm of bees. My vision blurred into a gray, grainy static. I reached for the edge of the heavy oak desk. My fingers slid off the polished wood. I hit the cold concrete floor. Then everything went black. I woke up to a rhythmic, mechanical chirping. The smell of hospital-grade antiseptic burned my throat. It is a sharp, clinical scent that sticks to your skin. My eyes felt like they were glued shut with salt. I forced them open. The ceiling was a grid of sterile white tiles. A plastic tube was taped to the side of my face. I tried to lift my right arm to touch it. Nothing happened. I stared at my hand resting on the thin blue blanket. It looked like a piece of dead marble. I couldn't feel my fingers. I couldn't feel the skin on my shoulder. Terror is a cold stone in the center of your chest. I tried to call out for Quinten, my husband of 22 years, the man who promised to be my North Star. Only a dry, raspy wheeze came out of my throat. I looked toward the plastic chair by the window. It was empty. There was a small table next to the bed. A single orchid sat in a cheap plastic pot. Its purple petals were shriveled and brown at the edges. It was dying. I looked at the glass door of my room. A nurse was standing at a computer workstation just outside. She swiped her finger across a digital tablet screen. I squinted, trying to focus my blurry vision. The screen was showing the visitor log for Ward 4B. The words "No visitors recorded" were glowing in a harsh blue font. Below that, the date was flickering. October 30th. My heart hammered against my ribs. I collapsed on the 26th. I have been here for 4 days. Where is my daughter, Imani? Where is Quinten? I remember our anniversary dinner just last year. We went to that steakhouse on Michigan Avenue. The candlelight reflected off his hazel eyes. He held my hand and said he'd never let me go. Now, the silence in this room is deafening. I'm sitting here at 2 a.m. recording this because I need you to understand. The records of my life are being rewritten. My right side is a lead weight. The clock on the wall says 3 a.m. I realize I have been here for 96 hours. Why am I alone? The door to room 427 finally creaked open at 3:14 a.m. I didn't have to look to know it was Quinten. I recognized the heavy, rhythmic thud of his designer loafers on the linoleum. He didn't rush to my bedside. He stayed by the door. He was fumbling with his keys in his pocket. The metallic jingle felt like needles pressing into my eardrums. I tried to lift my right arm to wave. It felt like a bag of wet cement pinned to the mattress. My fingers wouldn't even twitch. I managed to croak out his name, but my voice was thin and papery. He finally stepped into the harsh buzzing glow of the overhead fluorescent lights. He looked harried, with dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled collar. I reached out my left hand, the only one that still worked. He flinched when I tried to touch his palm. It wasn't a small movement. It was a physical recoil. It felt like I was made of live wire. He cleared his throat and looked at the wall behind my head. "The kids are too traumatized to see you like this, Zoraida," he said. His voice was flat, lacking the warmth of 22 years of marriage. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Imani is 19, Quinten," I whispered. "She's not a child." He just shook his head and pulled out his phone. I saw his thumb trembling as he swiped through his notifications. He muttered something about the Find My app acting up again. "It says your phone is at the museum, but it's not," he said. He looked at me then, his eyes cold and clinical. "I think your phone is broken," so I turned it off. A bright flash from his screen caught my eye as he turned away. He was tucking the device back into his blazer pocket. I saw a text message from our daughter, Imani. She's awake. Keep the garage locked. My stomach did a slow, nauseating flip. The garage is where I keep my professional life. It houses 20 years of historical archives and museum records. Why would my daughter need to lock me out of my own work? Quinten checked his watch and backed toward the door. He told me he had to get home to check on the house. He never asked if I was in pain. He didn't ask what the doctors had said about the paralysis. The room smelled like his expensive cologne mixed with hospital bleach. It was a suffocating, dishonest scent. I'll be back later, he lied, his hand already on the door handle. He left before the doctor even arrived for the morning rounds. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't even say he loved me. I sat there in the silence, watching the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked away, mocking my stillness. I am a senior archivist. I know how to spot a gap in the record. My husband was erasing himself from my recovery in real time. I looked at my dead right hand and felt a new kind of cold. I was alone in room 420 tills, and the people I loved were hiding the keys. The morning sun cut through the hospital blinds like a razor blade. It hit the white linoleum floor and made my eyes ache. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles. I counted 42 small holes in the one directly above me. My right arm felt like a piece of dead wood. It was heavy and cold and belonged to someone else. I tried to wiggle my thumb. Nothing happened. The air in the room smelled like bleach and stale plastic. Precisely the smell of a place where people go to be forgotten. A man stepped into the light. He wore navy blue scrubs and moved with a quiet grace. His name tag caught the light. Nathaniel Mensah. He didn't look at the monitors first. He looked at me. His eyes were dark and full of a heavy kind of pity. He dipped a soft white cloth into a basin of warm water. He began to wipe the dried sweat from my forehead. The texture of the damp cotton was rough against my skin. It was the first gentle thing I had felt in days. He leaned in close to adjust my pillow. I could smell the faint scent of coffee on his breath. He whispered that I was doing well. I tried to ask about the text on Quinten's phone. I wanted to ask why the garage had to stay locked. My voice came out as a broken rasp. I sounded like a stranger. Nathaniel didn't push me to speak. He reached for a yellow clipboard hanging on the end of my bed. He began flipping through the official medical charts. I saw his eyebrows knit together. He bit his lower lip as his eyes scanned the pages. I watched his hand tighten on the metal clip. He pulled a small neon green sticky note from his pocket. He scribbled something quickly and tucked it under my water pitcher. He leaned over me to check the IV bag. The plastic tubing rattled against the metal stand. He whispered that he would be back soon. He walked out and the heavy door clicked shut. I used my left hand to reach for the water pitcher. My fingers were trembling so hard I almost knocked it over. I grabbed the green paper. It was a personal note written in black ink. T asked for husband 4 times during shift. No answer on primary contact number. I stared at the words until they blurred. Quinten wasn't just missing my recovery. He was ignoring the hospital. He was letting their calls go to voicemail while he locked my garage. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The records never lie. This was a matter of public record now. My husband was intentionally leaving me in the dark. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck. I looked at the official chart again. There were huge gaps in the communication log. No one had called my daughter. No one had called my sister. It was just Quinten's name over and over. And he wasn't answering. Nathaniel returned 10 minutes later. He was carrying a small tray of medicine cups. He looked at the green note in my hand. He didn't take it away. He looked at the door and then back at me. He leaned over the bed rail. His voice was a low vibration in the quiet room. Mrs. Vaitkus, do you have anyone else we can call? Nathaniel waited for my answer. His eyes were kind. Too kind. I felt my throat tighten until it burned. I whispered one word. Elena, my sister in Milwaukee. I haven't seen her in 3 years. Nathaniel nodded slowly and squeezed my left hand. He tucked the green sticky note under my pillow. He told me he would try to find her number. He left the room quietly. The door clicked shut. The silence in room 427 felt heavy. It smelled like bleach and stale coffee. I looked at the guest tablet on the rolling tray. It was silver and cold to the touch. I reached out with my left hand. My right arm stayed dead on the sheets. It felt like a heavy piece of wood. I grabbed the tablet and pulled it close. My fingers were shaking. I opened the browser window. My heart was a drum in my ears. I logged in my primary email account. The screen was too bright. I squinted against the fluorescent lights. I expected thousands of messages from the museum. I expected frantic check-ins from my friends. Instead, there was a strange, hollow quiet. My inbox was nearly empty. I scrolled down past the spam. Then I saw a notification from our banking app. It was a charge for $85. Storage King. The date was yesterday. We don't have a storage unit. My stomach did a slow, sickening flip. I kept scrolling. Then I saw it. The subject line hit me like a physical blow. It was from Zillow. Your home at 1412 North Wells Street has been listed for sale. I stopped breathing. I tapped the link with a trembling finger. The listing popped up on the screen. There it was. My beautiful brownstone. The place where we spent 22 years. But the photos were wrong. I scrolled through the gallery. The living room looked like a sterile hotel. My grandmother's Baltic rug was gone. The walls were bare. Every family photo had been stripped away. I remembered buying that house in 2010. We popped champagne in the empty kitchen. Little Imani ran through the halls. She was screaming with joy. Now the kitchen looked dead. It looked like nobody lived there at all. The listing price was a fire sale. They wanted a quick close. I checked the history on the page. It was listed 72 hours after my stroke. 3 days. That is all it took. They weren't waiting for me to get better. They were liquidating me. My hand let go of the tablet. It hit the floor with a crack. I stared at the ceiling for hours. The fluorescent light was buzzing. It was loud and angry. I thought about the storage unit, Storage King. That is where my life is. All my photos and my clothes, they're in a plastic box. Everything I built is gone. My husband was selling the house. He was selling my kids' childhoods. I was sitting here in room 422. I was a ghost in my own life. They didn't want me to wake up. They needed me to stay gone. My whole world felt like it was breaking. The records never lie. It's a matter of public record now. The tablet lay on the linoleum floor like a dead bird. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks. I stared at the jagged glass. It reflected the buzzing fluorescent light above my bed. My house was for sale. My rugs were in storage. I was still breathing, but Quinten was already burying me. The door to room 42012 creaked open. It was 3014 a.m. Nathaniel stepped inside. He wasn't carrying a water pitcher this time. He held a thick manila folder against his chest. His face looked gray under the hospital lights. He didn't say a word. He pulled the privacy curtain shut. The metal rings shrieked against the rod. He sat on the edge of my bed. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. He opened the folder. It was my official medical file. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the physician order for life-sustaining treatment. We call it a pulsed form. My eyes went straight to the bottom of the page. There was a signature. It looked like mine. The Z had the same sharp slant I always use. But I never signed this. I couldn't have. On the date listed, I was unconscious. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Precisely 3 days ago, my hand was a useless weight at my side. I looked at the boxes checked in blue ink. Section A was the worst. The box for Do Not Resuscitate was marked DNR. If my heart stopped, they were supposed to let me go. If I stopped breathing, they were told not to help. Nathaniel pointed to the notes on the sidebar. His finger was trembling slightly. Quinten had called the nurse's station 4 times. He didn't ask about my physical therapy. He didn't ask if I had opened my eyes. He asked if the DNR was active yet. He asked about end-of-life protocols. My own husband was checking the clock on my existence. He was waiting for me to expire. The room felt like it was shrinking. The air tasted like hospital-grade antiseptic and betrayal. I traced the forged signature with my left thumb. The paper felt thick and grainy. This wasn't just about the brownstone on Wells Street. This wasn't about the money in the estate. He was clearing the path. He wanted the records to show I gave up. He wanted a clean exit. I looked up at Nathaniel. My voice was a raspy, jagged whisper. I asked him if he could change it. He looked at the door, then back at me. He said, "I'm not supposed to show you this." I told him the records never lie, but people do. My husband was a liar. He was a predator in a designer blazer. I felt the heat rising in my chest. It was a sharp, clinical fury. I wasn't a ghost yet. I was a witness. And I was gonna make sure he knew it. He didn't just want my house. He wanted me to stop breathing. The tablet screen was still spiderwebbed with cracks. It lay on the linoleum floor like a discarded bone. My hand was shaking as I reached for it. The plastic casing felt cold and clinical against my palm. I pulled it back onto the thin hospital sheets. Nathaniel stood by the privacy curtain, his eyes darting to the door. He was risking his entire career for a ghost. I didn't care about his career anymore. I only cared about the truth. I tapped the Instagram icon with my good left hand. My thumb hovered over the search bar. I typed my daughter's name. Her profile popped up immediately. It wasn't private anymore. It was a shrine. The profile picture had changed. It was a photo of her and me at the museum gala last year. I was wearing my favorite black silk blazer. She was smiling like she meant it. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I saw the first post on her feed. It was a carousel. The first image was a white square with a single date, October 26th. That was the day of my stroke. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. I swiped to the next slide. It was a photo of her in a hospital room. She was wearing my favorite pearl necklace. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She was holding a single-use tissue. The caption made the room spin. It started with, "Heaven gained an angel today." I read the words. Mom. It had been posted 3 days ago. 4,000 people had liked it, but comments were a wall of grief. People I saw at work last week, my coworkers from the museum, they were all sending their deepest condolences. One person wrote, "She will be so missed." Another said, "A legend." I looked at the heart monitor. The green line was spiking. I was watching my own digital funeral. My daughter had buried me in public. She did it while I was sleeping. I swiped to the next photo. It was a picture of my empty chair. My oak desk at the museum was bare. Someone had already left flowers there. White lilies in a glass vase. I could almost smell the funeral home. It smelled like antiseptic. Quinten's name was mentioned in a comment. Someone asked how he was holding up. Imani replied, "He's a broken man." I looked at my paralyzed right arm. It was heavy and very alive. I wasn't an angel in heaven. I was a prisoner in room 422. I scrolled through the tags on the post. There were hashtags for grief and loss. Number rip mom. Number grief journey. My daughter was performing for an audience. She was wearing my jewelry for the camera. My pearl necklace around her grieving neck. I felt a sharp, icy rage. It was a clinical, freezing clarity. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a documented digital erasure. She was part of the plan. She wasn't a victim of her father. She was his most effective tool. The house was listed for sale. My belongings were in Storage King. My daughter had officially declared me dead. I'm sitting here, heart beating, and my daughter has buried me online. I learned how to hold my breath until my lungs burned. I had to. If the world thinks I am dead, I need to look the part. The heart monitor in Ward 4B was chirping like a panicked bird. My pulse was hitting 140. I could feel the thumping in my ears, heavy and rhythmic. Nathaniel gripped my left hand. His palm was warm and rough against my cold skin. He whispered, "Zoraida, breathe. You have to stay under the radar." I forced my eyes shut. I focused on the smell of the floor wax and the faint scent of bleach. The monitor slowed down. The spikes on the screen smoothed into gentle hills. My daughter Imani thinks I am a memory. My husband Quinten is already counting the days until he can sell my life. They didn't just abandon me, they buried me while I was still drawing breath. Nathaniel stood by the door, his hand on the metal handle. He looked at me with those tired, honest eyes. I told him precisely what I needed. I said, "Tell them I've taken a turn." He didn't ask why. He just nodded and pulled a small black smartphone from his pocket. It was Saturday afternoon. The sunlight was cutting through the blinds in sharp, dusty lines. I watched him dial Quinten's number. He put it on speaker. My heart tried to gallop again, but I bit my lip until I tasted copper. The phone rang 3 times. Then Quinten's voice filled the sterile room. He sounded annoyed, like he was handling a telemarketer. Nathaniel kept his voice flat and clinical. He said, "Mr. Vaitkus, we've seen a significant decline in your wife's vitals." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the background noise of a busy street. It sounded like Michigan Avenue. Quinten didn't ask if I was in pain. He didn't ask if I was awake. He said one thing: how long until the body is released? My stomach turned to ice. I felt the bile rising in my throat. Nathaniel stared at the floor, his jaw tight. He told Quinten they would keep him updated. He ended the call and showed me the screen. The call log showed 45 seconds of my life being weighed like scrap metal. I looked at the cracked tablet on my bedside table. A news link was there. A GoFundMe page for my funeral expenses. The goal was $50,000. Imani had shared it twice in the last hour. She even used a photo of us from last Christmas. I was wearing my favorite silk blazer. Now I am just a prop in their tragedy. I told Nathaniel to turn off the lights. The room went gray. I lay there perfectly still. My right side was still a heavy, useless weight. But my left hand was a fist. I have to play the ghost to catch the killers. They think they are done with me. They are wrong. The records never lie, and I am writing a new one. The hunter becomes the prey. And right now, I'm the best ghost this hospital has ever seen. The screen of the hospital laptop was a blinding white rectangle in the dark. It smelled of ozone and the heavy floral scent of the floor wax. My eyes burned as the page loaded. There I was, a photo of me in this very bed, taken while I was unconscious. My mouth was hanging open, my face gray against the pillows. I looked like a corpse, waiting for a toe tag. The headline read, Zoraida's Final Journey in Medical Bills. It was a GoFundMe page, created by Quinten Vaitkus. I felt a sharp electric shock of nausea hit my stomach. I gripped the scratchy hospital sheet with my left hand. Precisely $85,000 had been raised in 4 days. The description said I was peacefully slipping away. It said the family needed help with the funeral and the mounting debt. I looked at the beneficiary name. Quinten Vaitkus, not the hospital. Not a trust for the children, just him. My mind flashed back to a sunny afternoon in 2015. We were sitting at the heavy oak desk in our study. I was signing a new life insurance policy. The scratch of the pen on the paper sounded so permanent. Quinten was leaning over my shoulder, his eyes bright and eager. He kept saying it was for the girl's future. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead now. He didn't want a recovery. He wanted a payout. I looked at the progress bar on the screen. It was a bright, mocking green. People from the museum had commented with broken heart emojis. They were mourning a woman who was still breathing in room 412. Nathaniel stood by the door, his silhouette dark against the hallway light. He whispered. He updated it an hour ago. I touched the screen with a trembling finger. The glass was warm. I saw a photo of Imani holding my pearl necklace. The caption said it was the only thing she had left of me. My throat felt like it was closing up. The air in Ward 4B became thin and metallic. I wasn't a mother or a wife to them anymore. I was a line item in a budget. I was a depreciating asset they were ready to liquidate. My right side was still a useless weight of meat and bone, but my left hand clenched into a tight white-knuckled fist. I looked at the donate button. It felt like a countdown clock to my own murder. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were banking on it. Precisely $85,000. That's what my life was worth to them. The $85,000 tracker on the GoFundMe page felt like a countdown to my own cremation. Nathaniel stood by the door, his silhouette cutting through the harsh, clinical light of the hallway. I looked at him. My left hand was still trembling against the hospital bed rail. I whispered one word to him, Wells. He knew my address from the intake forms. He pulled a personal smartphone from his scrub pocket. I typed my login for the Arlo app with my one working hand. The screen flickered to life. It was 2:22 p.m. back at the house on Wells Street. A massive white truck was idling at the curb. The side of the truck said, ProShred, secure document destruction. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. 2 men in neon vests were hauling heavy gray bins from my front door. I recognized those bins. They were my archival boxes. The ones labeled Lithuanian History, 1920 to 1940. These were primary sources I spent 20 years collecting. The men tipped the first bin into the mechanical lift. I watched the metal teeth of the industrial shredder begin to rotate. The sound didn't come through the app, but I could feel the vibration in my teeth. My life's work was being turned into gray confetti. Then Imani stepped into the frame. She was wearing my favorite trench coat. She held a steaming latte in one hand. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even looking upset. She checked her watch and nodded to the driver. The shredder groaned as it swallowed a stack of handwritten letters from 1924. Precisely 20 years of research gone in 20 seconds. I felt a cold, sharp pain in my chest. It felt like the starch in the hospital sheets was cutting into my skin. The men went back inside and emerged with more. They were dragging the heavy trunks from the garage. The one Quinten told Imani to keep locked at all costs. I watched the screen breathless. They weren't just cleaning the house. They were murdering my legacy. My daughter took a sip of her coffee while my history was pulverized. She looked toward the camera and adjusted her sunglasses. She looked so much like me. It was a cold, calculated betrayal. I looked up at Nathaniel. His face was a mask of pure horror. My archives are the only thing that proves I existed before this bed. If the papers are gone, the woman who wrote them is gone too. The truck moved to the next bin. This one held my family genealogy. The men didn't care. To them, it was just heavy paper. To Imani, it was just clutter in a house she wanted to sell. The $85,000 was for a funeral I wasn't having, but they were already burning the evidence of my life. I closed my eyes, but I could still see the shredder teeth. The garage was empty now. The secrets it held were likely in that truck. I am being erased in real time. It's a matter of public record now. They forgot one thing. I am still the archivist, and I am recording everything. The heavy archival bins are gone. My life's work is a pile of gray dust in a shredder truck. I sat in the dark of room 422s and felt the silence. It was precisely 2014 a.m. when the elevator doors hissed open. A woman stepped out onto the linoleum of Ward 4B. She didn't look like a ghost. She looked like me, but 20 years younger. She was wearing my vintage camel hair coat. I bought that coat at a boutique on Michigan Avenue in 1998. I could practically feel the silk lining against my own skin. The woman walked toward the nurse's station with a confident stride. My pulse began to thud in my ears like a hammer. She stopped at the desk and asked for Quinten's wife. Nathaniel stepped into her path before she could reach the hallway. I watched them through the narrow gap in my privacy curtain. The fluorescent lights made her skin look like polished marble. She was holding a designer handbag I didn't recognize. Her hand went to her stomach in a protective, familiar gesture. She was pregnant. The air in my room turned thin and cold. Nathaniel was stalling her. His voice was a low rumble I couldn't quite hear. He pointed toward the waiting area near the vending machines. The woman sighed and turned, and that's when it happened. Her phone slipped from her pocket and hit the floor with a sharp crack. Nathaniel moved fast to pick it up for her. He looked at the screen before handing it back. I saw his shoulders stiffen under his blue scrubs. He walked toward my room a moment later, his face pale. He leaned over my bed and showed me his own phone screen. He'd snapped a photo of her lock screen when he retrieved it. It was a picture of her and Quinten at a pumpkin patch. They were laughing under a wooden sign that said October Fun. The date on the corner of the photo was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I was planning our anniversary dinner. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my chest. My husband was picking pumpkins with a pregnant woman in my coat. I looked at the monitor. My heart rate was climbing into the triple digits. Nathaniel put a cold hand on my arm to steady me. "She's asking how much longer the room will be occupied," he whispered. My eyes went back to the window. The woman was pacing the hallway now. She looked at the door to room 4212 with clinical interest. She wasn't here to pay her respects. She was here to measure the curtains. The monitor above my head is screaming. It is a frantic electronic pulse that matches the thudding in my chest. Sunday, 2016 a.m. I am staring at the grainy photo on Nathaniel's phone screen. My husband is smiling at a pumpkin patch with a woman who is not me. She is wearing my 1998 camel hair coat. The silk lining I had repaired last winter is touching her skin. She looks exactly 6 months pregnant. Nathaniel pulls the phone away as the mistress paces past my door again. Her heels click against the linoleum with clinical precision. I can smell her perfume through the gap in the privacy curtain. It is a floral scent I don't recognize. My right side is still a heavy, useless weight of clay, but my left hand is a claw. I reach out and grab Nathaniel's scrub top. I whisper to him that I need to see Julian. Julian is my friend and the head of legal at the museum. Nathaniel looks at the door, then back at me. He knows this is a risk. He nods once and disappears into the fluorescent haze of the hallway. Precisely 1 hour later, the curtain rods slide back. Julian is standing there in a wrinkled trench coat. He looks like he hasn't slept in 3 days. He doesn't say a word. He just pulls a get well card from a florist's envelope. The card has a picture of a watercolor sunset on the front. Inside, there are no well wishes. There is a revocation of power of attorney form. It feels cold and waxen against my palm. This is the paper that will strip the ghost mask off my face. Julian whispers that Quinten has already filed for a death certificate. He tells me the brownstone on Wall Street is officially under contract. My heart rate spikes again. The red numbers on the monitor jump to 110. I can feel the sweat pooling at the base of my neck. Julian places a heavy silver fountain pen in my left hand. My fingers feel clumsy and weak. I have to prove I am of sound mind. I have to prove I am still a living person. I press the nib of the pen to the bottom of the form. The ink is dark and thick. It smells like copper and old records. I guide my left hand with a trembling, agonizing focus. I am Zoraida Vaitkus. I am not a GoFundMe page. I am not a memorial lily on a museum desk. The signature is jagged and messy. It looks nothing like my usual elegant script, but it is mine. It is the only thing Quinten hasn't stolen yet. Nathaniel stands by the door, acting as our lookout. He signs his name as the first witness. His handwriting is bold and steady. Julian signs as the second witness and presses a notary seal onto the page. The sound of the metal stamp hitting the paper is the loudest thing I've ever heard. It is the sound of a trap snapping shut. Julian tucks the document back into the get well card. He tells me he will file it first thing Monday morning. He squeezes my hand and vanishes before the shift change. The mistress is gone from the hallway now. The ward is silent again. I lie back against the starched white pillow. My left hand is cramped into a tight, aching ball. The papers were signed. Now I just needed to survive the night. The digital clock on the wall read 3:52 a.m. My left hand was a tight, aching claw, signing that revocation had drained every ounce of my physical strength. Julian was gone now. He was carrying the notarized papers into the cold Chicago night. He will file them at the courthouse first thing Monday morning. I just have to survive until then. I have to stay alive through the Sunday shift change. The morning nurses will rotate in at 7 a.m. I stared at the ceiling and focused on taking slow, shallow breaths. The air smelled of sharp, hospital-grade antiseptic. And then I heard it. A pair of heavy designer loafers clicked down the hallway. My heart rate monitor gave a sudden, panic spike. I forced my breathing to slow down. I shut my eyes tight. I had to play dead. The door to room 420 tab clicked open. The scent of rain and wet wool pushed into the sterile air. Footsteps crossed the linoleum floor. They stopped right next to my bed. I smelled his expensive sandalwood cologne. Quinten was standing over me. He was dressed in a sharp black wool suit. It was the suit he bought for our daughter's college graduation. He looked ready for a funeral. Another set of lighter footsteps followed him in. Imani stood on the other side of my bed. I could hear her breathing. It was shallow and ragged. Quinten did not say a word to me. He reached out and touched the plastic IV line. His fingers were cold. He traced the clear tube up to the hanging bag. I kept my body perfectly still. I did not let my eyelids flutter. Nathaniel had warned me they might come back early. He had prepared for this very moment. He had tucked his personal cell phone inside the ceramic flower vase on my nightstand. The camera lens was aimed directly at the side of my bed. It was recording everything in high definition. "We need to get this over with," Imani whispered. I heard her voice crack. She sounded exhausted. "The doctor said we can sign the withdrawal papers this morning." Quinten let out a low, heavy breath. "We are doing it precisely at 8, he said. His voice was cold and clinical. The lawyer confirmed the timing. I felt a tear burn the corner of my closed eye. I forced it to stay there. "But what about the Zillow listing?" Imani asked him. "The buyer wants to inspect the Wells Street house on Tuesday." Quinten's clothes rustled as he checked his watch. "The house sale is already under contract," he replied. "By tonight, we are millionaires." He sounded so calm. He sounded like he was reviewing a museum inventory list. "The GoFundMe is sitting at $85,000, he continued. "And the 2015 life insurance policy will clear within 30 days. Imani did not answer him. I heard a soft, crinkling sound. She was pulling a tissue from the box on the counter. Then she began to cry. She was not crying because her mother was lying there dying. She was crying because the legal process was moving too slowly. "I just want to move into the new place," she sobbed quietly. "I cannot keep living out of these suitcases." I lay there in the dark. My own daughter wanted me dead so she could have a bigger closet. The betrayal felt like a physical blade slicing through my chest. Quinten stepped closer to my pillow. I felt his warm breath on my face. "She was always so meticulous about records," he murmured. "It is ironical." He did not know that his daughter was standing in front of a hidden camera. He did not know that his words were a matter of public record now. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. My skin crawled at his touch. I smelled the same cologne he wore on our wedding day. The digital clock on the wall reads 3053 a.m. I have exactly 4 hours and 7 minutes left. At 8 a.m., my husband plans to sign the papers to end my life. I am lying perfectly still in this rigid hospital bed on Ward 4B. My left hand is cramped into a tight, aching claw. I am clutching the heavy metal guardrail of the bed. The air in this room smells like sour milk and industrial bleach. Quinten stands by the window, staring out at the dark Chicago streets. He thinks I am a vegetable. He thinks he is looking at a blank canvas he can easily paint over. Imani is sitting in the plastic vinyl chair in the corner. She's scrolling on her phone, the blue light reflecting off her face. I can hear the soft, rapid tapping of her fingernails against the glass screen. She looks bored. She is waiting for me to die so she can have a bigger closet. That is what she said on the recording. I know this because Nathaniel's cell phone is hidden inside the ceramic flower vase. It is still recording every single word they say. The weight of their betrayal is a physical blade pressing into my chest. But they do not know that I can hear them. They do not know that I am fully awake. I close my eyes and listen to the hum of the heart monitor. It is a slow, rhythmic beep. I need to keep it steady. I cannot let them see my panic. I hear the door handle turn with a soft click. Dr. Eris walks into the room holding a gray plastic clipboard. He looks tired. His white coat is wrinkled and there are dark bags under his eyes. He looks at Quinten and then at Imani. Mr. Vaitkus, the doctor says in a low, measured voice, we need to discuss the protocol for 8 a.m. Quinten turns away from the window. He rubs his hands together. I can smell the expensive leather of his designer loafers. Yes, doctor, Quinten says. His voice is smooth and practiced. We are ready. It is what she would have wanted. I feel a surge of pure white-hot rage boil up in my throat. It is what I would have wanted. He is standing there, lying to a doctor to secure an $85,000 GoFundMe payout. He wants the life insurance policy I signed back in 2015. He wants to sell the Wells Street brownstone. He has already put it under contract. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with that sterile, freezing air. This is the moment. I gather every ounce of strength left in my paralyzed right side. I focus all my energy on my spine. I sit bolt upright in the bed. The plastic sheets crinkle loudly under my weight. My eyes snap open and lock directly onto Quinten's face. Dr. Eris gasps and drops his clipboard. It hits the linoleum floor with a loud slap. Imani screams and drops her phone. The screen cracks against the metal base of the chair. Quinten freezes. His mouth falls open. His eyes go wide with pure, unadulterated terror. He takes a staggering step backward until his back hits the cold glass of the window. I look him dead in the eye. My voice is a raspy, trembling whisper that cuts through the silence. I am not dead yet, Quinten, I say. The words are thick and dry, but they are precise. The records never lie. It is a matter of public record now. I reach over with my left hand and pull the green curtain back. 2 Chicago police officers and my lawyer Julian are standing right there. Julian holds a thick manila folder containing the police report for grand larceny and attempted manslaughter. One officer steps forward holding a pair of metal handcuffs. He looks at my husband. Quinten Vaitkus, you are under arrest. The color drained from his face until he was the one who looked like a ghost. The handcuffs clicked with a finality that should have felt like peace. It didn't. I watched the Chicago police lead Quinten out of room 422. His expensive leather loafers squeaked against the sterile linoleum floor. Imani stood in the corner, her face a mask of ruined makeup and terror. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a wheelchair by the hospital's sliding glass doors. The autumn air hit my face like a cold sheet of metal. It was Sunday morning, 6:14 a.m. Nathaniel was there, still in his blue scrubs, pushing my chair. He didn't have to stay past his shift. He did anyway. We waited for the transport van in the gray morning light. My right side still felt like lead, heavy and unresponsive. But my left hand was gripped tight around my armrest. I had a destination. I had to see what was left of 1412 North Wells Street. The drive to the city felt like a dream I couldn't wake up from. We pulled up to the curb of the brownstone. The for sale sign in the small front yard was already marked under contract. I felt a sharp stabbing pain in my chest. A locksmith was already waiting by the heavy oak front door. Julian had arranged everything before the police took him in. The lock clicked open with a hollow metallic snap. I stepped inside the foyer, leaning heavily on a walker. The smell of hospital-grade antiseptic was replaced by something worse. It was the smell of emptiness and lemon-scented floor wax. My Baltic rug was gone. The space where it lived for 20 years was just a pale rectangle. I moved toward the kitchen, my breath hitching in my throat. The counters were completely bare. Not a single coffee mug or stray spoon remained. I reached the mahogany desk in the corner of the living room. This was where Quinten kept the family iMac. I sat down, my legs trembling under my weight. The screen glowed to life, casting a ghostly blue light on my face. I didn't need to guess the password. It was our wedding anniversary. Precisely as I suspected, the Find My app was already open in a tab. I scrolled through the location history logs from the last month. My skin began to crawl. On October 27th, while I was intubated, my phone was listed as disabled, but Quinten's phone showed a very different story. At 2:15 p.m. that day, he wasn't at the hospital. He was at Tiffany & Co. on Michigan Avenue. I stared at the mat pin. It sat there like a drop of poison on the screen. He was buying a ring while the nurses were checking my vitals. I clicked on the browser history next. He hadn't just been looking for divorce lawyers. He had searched for expedited death certificate processing 3 weeks ago. That was before my stroke. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. He wasn't just waiting for me to die. He had been tracking my every move for months. He had removed me from the family sharing plan to hide his own GPS pings. I looked at the recent downloads folder on the desktop. There was a PDF titled Prenuptial Agreement Draft. It wasn't mine. It was for her. The pregnant woman in my camel hair coat. He didn't just want me gone. He wanted to step into my life with someone else without even changing the locks. The heavy steel door of Unit 402 rumbled upward with a deafening metallic screech. I stood there in the dim hallway of the Storage King facility. The air smelled of cold concrete and ancient, trapped dust. My left hand gripped the cold aluminum handle of my walker. Nathaniel stood just behind me, his shadow long against the corrugated metal. I expected to see my life thrown into chaotic heaps. I expected the mess of a hurried eviction. Instead, I saw a masterpiece of clinical organization. My grandmother's hand-woven Lithuanian lace was laid out on a folding table. It wasn't shoved in a box. It was draped over acid-free tissue paper. Beside it sat a stack of pre-printed price tags. One tag was tied to the delicate cream-colored fringe. It read, Estate Sale Item 44, Rare Baltic Textile. Precisely 44. He had cataloged my soul while I was still breathing. I felt a sharp, icy needle of breath catch in my lungs. My knees began to tremble against the metal frame of the walker. I moved deeper into the unit, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. I found a small gray fireproof lockbox sitting on my old mahogany nightstand. The key was still in the lock. I turned it with my good hand. Inside, tucked under my birth certificate, was a single folded receipt. It was a contract for this very storage unit. I looked at the date printed in the upper right corner. April 20th. Our 22nd wedding anniversary. He didn't buy me jewelry or flowers that day. He rented a tomb for my belongings. This happened 6 months before my stroke. 6 months before I collapsed on the museum floor. My head started to throb with a rhythmic, pulsing heat. This wasn't a panicked reaction to a medical emergency. This was a long con. I looked at the prenuptial agreement again in my mind. The dates finally aligned like tumblers in a heavy vault lock. He had been clearing the stage for the mistress since the spring. I leaned my weight against the cold stone wall of the unit. I found my daughter's childhood journals in a plastic bin labeled discard. My chest felt like it was being crushed by an invisible vice. Imani knew. She had to know. You don't help tag your mother's lace for an estate sale by accident. I picked up a small silver-framed photo of our wedding day. The glass was cool and smooth against my palm. I saw Quinten's younger face smiling back at me. He looked so honest. It was a lie that lasted 2 decades. I realized then that my stroke wasn't the tragedy of my life. It was the climax he had been praying for. He had the stage set, the props moved, and the new leading lady waiting. He just needed me to stop talking. The silence of Ward 4B wasn't a mistake. It was the final requirement for his new life. I dropped the silver frame into the discard bin. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the empty hallway. My stroke wasn't the start of the end. It was the lucky break he'd been waiting for. The headline on the Chicago Tribune website was precisely 6 words long. A woman who woke to her own funeral. I stared at the screen of my new phone in the quiet of my temporary apartment. The blue light reflected off the sterile white walls. It had been 3 weeks since the arrest. My story had been shared over 1 million times on Facebook. People I didn't know were weeping for a woman they thought was a ghost. I leaned back against the firm cushions of the sofa. My right hand still felt heavy, like it was made of damp clay. But my left hand was steady as I scrolled through the comments. Justice for Zoraida, one stranger wrote. Monster husband, wrote another. I felt a cold clinical satisfaction spreading through my chest. The records never lie, and now the whole world was reading them. 2 days later, I was sitting in the back of a black car. We pulled up to the Cook County Courthouse on California Avenue. The morning air was crisp and smelled of exhaust and coming snow. I smoothed the fabric of my navy wool coat. It wasn't the camel hair one the mistress had stolen. This one was new, crisp, and mine. I walked into the lobby, the marble floors echoing under my low heels. Every click of my shoes felt like a second chance. The courtroom was small and smelled of old paper and bitter coffee. I took my seat behind the prosecution table. Quinten was already there, sitting in a tan jumpsuit that washed out his skin. He looked smaller than I remembered. He wouldn't look at me. Imani sat 3 chairs away from him. Her eyes were red. She was shredding a damp tissue in her lap. I watched her fingers move. It was the same way she used to sort through my archival bins. A court officer handed a stack of documents to the judge. I saw the yellow flash of the forged Polsty form. I saw the printed screenshots of the GoFundMe page. It's a matter of public record now, Quinten. The judge's voice was a low drone in the quiet room. She spoke about premeditation and the April 20th storage contract. She mentioned the $85,000 taken from grieving strangers. My daughter looked up then and caught my eye. She mouthed the word mama against the glass partition. I felt nothing. It was a hollow sensation, like an empty display case in the museum. I didn't cry. I didn't nod. I just watched her through the lens of a professional observer. She had tagged my life for an estate sale while I was still breathing. Now she was just another artifact of a life I used to lead. The sentencing took less than an hour. Quinten received 15 years for attempted manslaughter and fraud. Imani was looking at 5 for conspiracy and theft. As they led them out, the room felt suddenly, sharply cold. Quinten finally looked back at me. I didn't flinch. I didn't offer a single word of comfort. They asked for mercy. I gave them the same thing they gave me for 21 days, silence. The heavy oak doors of the Chicago History Museum usually feel like a fortress. Today they feel like a beginning. It is exactly 9:14 a.m. The air smells of floor wax and old paper. My right side still feels like heavy, damp clay. I have to lean my weight into my left hip to stand straight. But I am standing. My desk is finally clear of the memorial lilies. The white petals had turned yellow and curled like scorched parchment. In their place sits a vibrant, blooming peony. The petals are a deep, defiant pink. Nathaniel brought it by during his break this morning. He looked at my empty office and smiled. He told me the hospital ward feels too quiet without my investigations. We sat in the silence of the archives for 10 minutes. I checked my phone while he sipped a lukewarm coffee. A notification popped up from my banking app. It was a wire transfer from Quinten's seized assets. Exactly $85,000. The blood money from the GoFundMe is back where it belongs. I looked at the screen until the numbers blurred. It's a matter of public record now. My husband and daughter are officially residents of the Illinois Department of Corrections. The records never lie. They tried to turn my life into a museum exhibit while I was still breathing. They labeled my history as discard. I looked down at my right hand resting on the desk. It didn't move, but the skin felt warm in the sunlight. I reached out with my left hand and touched the new peony. The texture was velvet against my fingertips. I opened a new acid-free archival box. I placed the first item inside. It wasn't a map from the 19th century. It was the business card Julian gave me at the courthouse. This is the start of a new collection. My house on Wells Street is gone. The Baltic rugs and the family photos are ash or in someone else's living room, but the archivist is still here. I am recording the truth precisely as it happened. My past was stolen, but my oxygen is my own. I used to preserve history for a living. Now, I'm busy making sure my future never becomes a museum of someone else's lies. If this story hit you, drop a like to let me know you're out there. Subscribe if you want to hear more about how I'm rebuilding from the studs. Hit that bell and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Where are you watching this from right now? What time is it there? I'm Zoraida and I'm still here.